Howdy! This is Combining Transformations, Part 1. And as you can see with my example, it's got everything going on here, just about. So how do we deal with this stuff? What are we going to do when we got so many things happening? It's really hard to keep clear where the graph is. And I mean, you've got translations here, both horizontally and vertically. Looks like we're doing some sort of stretch or compression, both horizontally and vertically. I don't see any reflections, but how do we keep track of all this? Well, here's the best way. Okay, you basically just list what transformations are happening horizontally to the x's and vertically to the y's. And just remember, when you list these, you want to keep them in the same order as bed mass. In other words, do your stretch or compression first and then do any translation or shift. Okay? In other words, I look at this here and I go, okay, well, there's a 2 sitting in front of my x stuff. So that means I'm going to multiply by its reciprocal. I'm going to take all my x distances and make them half as big. Then I'm also, when that's all done, I'm going to shift this thing positive 1 step to the right. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to compress my graph by a half, and then I'm going to shift it 1 to the right. Okay. Now let's analyze the y stuff. The y stuff, well, let's see. We got a 1/2 sitting out in front, so that means I'm going to multiply by 2. So it's going to actually get stretched or expanded by a factor of 2, followed by -3. So I want to shift the whole thing down 3 steps. Now, it's really tough to try and do all this in your head. So the best way, keep it clear, is to remember some of the old points that we had. Like we had for the square root function, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 4, 2. Those are the old points. Now let's figure out the new points. Okay, so I'm basically now going to reconfigure these points. And I'm going to use these changes to tell me exactly where I am. So I take my x-coordinate of 0, and I times it by 1/2. So it's still 0, and then I add 1. See, I'm shifting it. Okay, now I find it easier when I do all my x's at the same time. So now I'm going to take 1, times it by a half, so squish it up, so it's now 1/2, and then I add 1. See, I'm shifting it over a little bit. And then take the 4, times it by a half, so compressed it to 2, but then I shift it over 1, so I'm now at 3. There's my new locations for the x's. Now I'm going to do the y locations. So I can times by 2, so that would be 0, and then -3, so that would be -3. Then I'm going to plug in 1. 1 times 2 is 2, -3, so it gets shifted down to -1. And then the 2 times 2 is 4, and then shifting down 3 is 1. So these are the new counterparts of these original points. So now, on a very basic sort of grid over here, let's just see where we are. We are at, actually, some more points here. 1 and -3. 1, 2, 3. So that 0, 0, the start of our graph, is now down there. Then we're at 1.5 and -1. So now we're here. And then we have 3, and we're up 1, so something like that. So here's what I have happened. Remember, this was our starting point. This is the new 0, 0. And it's still a square root graph, so it still has that basic sort of curve structure to it, but there's my graph. Now, the only other thing I'm going to say about this example before I leave it, because this is really a completed graph, and that's awesome, but be warned, sometimes it's not given in this very nice implicit version. Sometimes they've rearranged it to make it explicit. So just to show you what that would look like, you'd multiply both sides by 2, okay, So we'd have a 2 in front of the radical. And then often they expand out the brackets inside the radical to boot. And then the last thing is they bring the 3 over. So this is the explicit form, which I don't like because it's much more confusing as to what's going on. So this is the explicit, but be warned, it's out there, so you got to know how to handle it. So what I usually do, if I see it like this, I work my way back to this form, and then I make my analysis. All right. Okay, I think we've got enough time to look at one more example. And in this example, I'm not going to try and do a graph. All I'm going to say is that we had this original function, and it looked like this. And somebody came along and did all of this to it. Look at, they just went crazy. They went negative 6 times f of 5x minus 10 plus 24. They just went wild. I don't know what the graph even looks like. I don't know what kind of function it is. But we're going to identify all transformations. So that's our goal. Identify all transformations. Okay. Well, first things first. This is explicit form, which I don't like. So I'm going to rearrange it. I'm going to bring that 24 over to the left side to start us off. And maybe the other thing I can do, whenever you have it like this where there's no brackets inside, whatever number's in front of x, as a rule, you got to factor that number out. Otherwise, you get the wrong horizontal shift. So I'm going to factor that 5 out, which gives me an x minus 2. Okay, and that looks pretty, oh wait, we got this negative 6. So I'm going to divide that negative 6 over to the other side. So here's what we have. Negative 1/6 in front. And then I have y minus 24 in brackets. Okay, so that's the negative 1/6 was just me dividing the negative 6 to the other side. And now I have my function over on this side. All nicely factored, so I'm ready to make my analysis. Okay, so x's, what are we doing to x? Well, there's a 5 out in front, so it means we're multiplying by 1/5. Now, if you had to, that would be a compression. If you had to analyze that, somebody wanted to know. Horizontally, we're compressing by 1/5, and then we are shifting it to the right. See, x minus 2, so positive 2, or 2 to the right. Maybe a little arrow even to show that. All right, well, that's the horizontal stuff analyzed. What about the vertical stuff? Well, what number do we have out in front? I see it's a negative 1/6. So that would be multiplying by negative 6. So that would be vertical expansion, okay, by a factor of 6. What about the whole negative thing? Remember what that did? The negative is down here with the vertical stuff, with the y stuff. So it's actually going to reflect across the x-axis. Okay, so that negative in front of that 6 is actually telling us, oh yeah, we got to reflect across the x-axis. What else do we have happening here? Oh, I got a y minus 24, so that's like saying plus 24, or 24 in a positive direction, so we're shifting 24 up. So there it is. I've made my complete analysis of all the different transformations. And there it is, and that's where I think we're going to stop with this for now.